Welcome back to another episode of Projecting Grandeur. I'm your host, Ron Dichter. Today, we're going to talk about discomfort. Actually, more specifically, we're going to talk about being comfortable, being uncomfortable. So making your discomfort something that you're comfortable with. You know, when starting out a new business or changing careers, it's scary. And there's going to be a lot of new that you're going to have to embrace. And discomfort and being uncomfortable with something that may not be familiar to you is something that you're going to have to become, well, very comfortable with. And there's a lot of times in my career where I have done things that, I'm not exactly in my comfort zone. And you always hear that expression of getting outside of your comfort zone. And that comes from being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And the more that you do something that's uncomfortable, the less uncomfortable it becomes. I remember back when I was a small child, and I was maybe 7, I think, and it was the first time that I had the opportunity to jump off of a 3-meter springboard at the pool. And I used to love going to the pool with my friends, and they had the low diving board, or the 1-meter springboard, and then they had the 3-meter springboard, and I was terrified of it. And I remember the first time that I climbed up that ladder and I stood at the edge of that diving board looking down, thinking to myself, I'm gonna die. And there were probably 2 or 3 times where I would go back down the ladder, terrified to jump off of it. And then one day I just said, I'm gonna do it. And I jumped off that high dive and I couldn't get enough of it. I must have done it 50 times that day, to where I got to the point where I was not only comfortable jumping off of it, but bouncing off of it, and then going from a jump to a dive. But it all started with that one uncomfortable experience of standing on the end of that diving board. And when you make that plunge of going from uncomfortable to comfortable, it not only becomes easy, it actually becomes fun. And the reason it becomes fun is because you've overcome something or gotten out of your comfort zone. So as you go into business and you start thinking about what you're going to do, whether you're an operator and you're really good about process and flow, but now that you're in the world of a business owner, you're now playing sales as well. And maybe you've never picked up the phone and made an outbound call, or maybe you've never responded to an ad and talked to the customer. Maybe you've always had a team of people who at the companies you worked for did that for you. And now you're being thrust into this role where, as a small business owner and an entrepreneur, you're wearing a ton of hats. You may have never, cleaned a floor, but guess what? You're probably mopping the floor or vacuuming the floor, or you've never, figured out how a process of onboarding goes. All of these things have to become familiar and ultimately comfortable, because not only are you going to have to learn how to do them, you're going to actually have to train others to do them as well. And so in order for you to become comfortable in the discomfort of uncomfortability, you've got to get repetitions in to do it. So if you go back to that example of me as a little 7-year-old standing at the end of that diving board, I didn't want to do it that first time. Well, let me rephrase it. I did want to do it. I was terrified to do it. And as I got more comfortable, it not only wasn't scary and uncomfortable anymore, it actually was familiar and fun. And I've trained so many salespeople I couldn't even count, and I can think of some of my most successful people who had never done sales in their life, terrified of it. I don't even know how they got the interview, frankly, but there's been so many times in my career where I've taken somebody who's never done never done a sale, never made a call, never talked to a customer in their life, and not only did they become comfortable, they actually became good. And there's people that span back 2.5 decades now that I had the opportunity to train that have now gone on to have tremendous careers. They've started their own businesses. They become CEOs of large organizations, and I couldn't be more proud of the amount of people that I've had the opportunity to help in whatever stage of their career they're at. And it goes back to, they got comfortable being uncomfortable. And so as you're starting out, you've got to be willing to embrace that. And you also have to know that the first time that you're uncomfortable doing something that you aren't comfortable doing, you're going to suck at it. And that's okay. You know, when I back in my early career, I used to train salespeople on the phones a lot. And I would always say to them, look, your first 10 calls, I don't care how good you are on the phone, you don't understand the material, the vernacular that you're going to use on, you know, whatever company I was working on. It's different than probably something you've done in the past. And your first 10 calls will suck. Guess what? Your 100th call is probably also going to suck. It's just not going to suck as bad as the first 10 calls. And then eventually what happens is by your 1000th call, you might actually be good enough where you can actually get a sale, an appointment, whatever it is your objective is. And over time, you know, what was once terrifying and uncomfortable and scary and you're not good at, all of a sudden you become really good at it to the point where you become an expert. And you've heard that old saying that you have to practice something for 10,000 hours to become, I don't know if it's proficient or an expert or whatever the term is, but that's really the same concept, that you've got to become comfortable being uncomfortable, and ultimately those things that were once uncomfortable become comfortable. So put in the repetitions, put in the time. Don't be concerned or have it turn you away if you have bad experiences in the beginning. You're uncomfortable. You've never done this thing. You've got to figure it out. You've got to put in the time, put in the repetitions, and eventually you will get there. So put in the time, be comfortable being uncomfortable, get out of your own way, go conquer the world. See ya.